Years ago, it was my own dialogues and engagement with states of depression and anxiety that led me to explore affect as I worked with child patients in infant mother diet and adult patients. So this led me to Julie's work, which resonates with me deeply, and that naturally drew me to delve into the regions of negative affect and Sabina Spilrain. Now, psychoanalysis has moved away from placing exclusive importance on sexuality in the service of individual pleasure to understanding the psyche through subject-subject interactions. So in this, affect is the somatic, representational, perceptual, memory, and feeling states of the psyche. Now, we can define affect regulation as identifying, monitoring the experience and expression of affect, much of which occurs in the implicit unconscious mind. This process is inherently relational. We effectively think about others to experience empathy. Now, the word empathy is derived from the German Einfühlung. The term empathy is how the ego identifies with someone else in order to grasp their subjective experience. And during the early phase of his work, Freud said that the qualities of empathy were instrumental in analyst's work. Now, working simultaneously, Sabina Spilrain notes the weakness in Freud's work, convincingly placing the dead drive as the central mechanism of the mind. Now, in doing so, she pushed the envelope of Freudian theorizing at the time and laid the groundwork for, which I believe is modern affect regulation theory. She extended empathy through the lens of the dead drive to include affect, and through the clinical case synopsis of patients suffering from dementia precoce, hysteria, discussions of dreams, and explorations of unconscious of artists and neurotics, she presents a remarkable anticipation of current psychoanalysis. My focus here is restricted, the Spilrenian dead drive process. So I draw from her clinical work to support my conceptual understanding within current affect regulation studies. Spilrain says, well, Freud is talking in terms of pleasure and repression of the sexual instinct. This is theological thinking. Why? Well, Freud's work lacks inquiry into the motivations behind pleasure. According to Freud, pleasure is an innate force of the human psyche with a constant energy in affective forms. So in Freud's early stage of his theory, pleasure is the primary element that governs our functioning with external factors and potentially disrupting the inner psyche. Now, this causes intense feelings that the individual must discharge, so severe negative affect experiences are repressed. Now, Freud believes that drives and affect interfere with our perception of reality, and that the sensory perception of the external world is objective. So it aims to remove these distortions and preserve mental representation. Now, Freud's tension reduction model of the mind overlooks the importance of interpersonal relationships in shaping our psychological development. So here, Spilrain challenges the Freudian instinct impulse model centered on extraction, discharge, and the recovery of the pristine core, if you will. Now, what is her approach? She begins examining the origins of subjective experiences within negative affect as central to them. She begins to view affect in qualitative rather than in quantitative ways. Spilrain develops the we psyche concept, which is fundamental and relates to others in having the mind-to-mind linkage. And for her, sexuality is simply a byproduct of the species dimension. Now, she begins her paper with a synopsis of a child patient, highlighting the function of toned feeling as a form of affect. She underlines that everything that moves us aims to be felt is important and understood. So for Spilrain, past experience is embedded in the present. And she says, look, developmental trajectory is implicit as the patient can invoke memories of a relationship with her mother. Now, herein lies the lifeline of her debt drive. A young patient in treatment who enjoys reading stories about witches says when she was a child, in her play, she pretended to be a witch. The witch is a representation of a mother with whom she identifies. And now in her reading, there's a slight pleasure, to be sure, and the patient could even mimic her mother's past. The witch stories are just folklore in which the feeling tone is displaced. The stories conceal the life story lived by the mother. Pleasure in reading the stories? Yes, but only under one condition, the patient's experience of the relationship with the mother, with her mother. So Spilrain seems to be introducing the idea of internal working models in attachment from attachment theory. These are early representational patterns formed via mother-infant interactions. Here, the unconscious is the home for self-sacrifice, where the maternal figure teaches the developing subject how to think and feel what others are thinking and feeling. This is possible for the subject precisely because the attachment figure learned herself through experience what caring implies. Now, speaking of teaching, the Dutch phrase for caring is zorgen, which appears to convey an increased magnitude of the more severe and concerning aspects of caring. The expression kinderzorg refers to childcare, and zorkin denotes a child who requires special care and causes significant perturbation. While zorkin does not necessarily contain a negative affect, the term, I think, signifies anxiety as a central negative affect. For example, a mother offers herself in ways that can lead to trepidations, disruptions, and strains. Motherhood extends beyond being just responsibility, embodying a journey of self-sacrifice that demands a mother's active participation in her infant's survival. It is a beautiful yet dynamic dying process that requires immense dedication and commitment in the form of love. Now, this appears to be a natural biological result of mothering. And along these lines, altruism, or the selfless act of helping others, is because of the attachment system, the collective unconscious mind, a shared pool of memories, beliefs, and experiences beyond conscious awareness. Crucial situations can activate the debt drive and affect processes, highlighting their linkage. Now, the mother-child relationship is a unique and special bond that requires a particular type of engagement, and that is the mirroring. A child actively seeks out the mother's attention and interacts with her, showing a natural inclination toward engagement. The process is natural and does not require formal training for the mother to become a mirror for the child. Now, through largely unconscious processes, a mother can understand and relate to her child's mental states, attuning herself to the inner need and helping the child to identify, label, and regulate their feelings. By communicating to her child that she's receiving with deep empathy their mental state, a mother creates an environment in which the child can see their own mind reflected in hers through facial expressions, how she holds them, and how she cradles them. So a maternal figure repeatedly provides her child with affect regulation through a process of monotonous engagement that happens daily. Repeated interactions are essential to help the child learn how to regulate their feelings and become more adaptive to their social environment. One of the main functions of mirroring is to provide room for negative affect. So, and what matters here is it's the accepting in its entirety negative affect rather than eliminating it. This, I think, suggests that love is a substrate within affect regulation processes. The implicit affect exchanges are completely present at birth, and the memory patterns are formed through repetition. Now, emphasizing how past experiences guide a patient's current response to a situation, Spilrain notes that one must understand any meaning assigned to the present from previously toned material. Now, this view is seen in the young patient who engaged in stories for her mother. For the girl, the stories are pleasurably tinged only insofar as the mother's life is pleasurable for her. This is Spilrain. So the narrative captures the idea of self-sacrifice and the experience of pain in joy, pain in joy. So Spilrain is asking now, do the basic drives of preservation, self and species, possess a similar value for the whole psychic life and ego, that is to say, pleasure and displeasure? So she explores the interplay between the primary id and ego processes, saying that the patient's interaction with the stories is not about her. So here, the Freudian sense of pleasure does not have a primary status in the understanding of the patient. Spilrain later reflects in the paper. The purely personal can never be understood by others. So she's saying that to be understood goes beyond the function of the rational, logical mind. The subject's deep unconscious is the key. Now, within her framework, the idea of feeling understood overlaps with the current concept of mentalization, which means essentially that it is not reasonably possible to know exactly what others think and feel, but one can seek clarification on what others have in their minds. We engage in emotional dwelling and are attuned to how others think and feel and reflect on our own feelings. Now, for example, forgiveness can be a complex process that involves perspective taking and appreciating others' experiences. It is one of the significant themes of good mentalization. Forgiveness requires one to accept and move past the wrongdoings of others while still acknowledging the mental state of the person who caused the pain. This is crucial to forgiveness because it guides in enduring negative affect. It also entails the increasing ability to appreciate the differences in how minds function, such as the distinction between 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds. So this brings us to dead-dry mechanism and implications for negative affect regulation processes. So here, what we see is that I've distilled this as having Spilrain, sharing two distinct stages within the theory, showing the dead-dry processes. First, the activation of ego particles is due to emotional information through the senses and drawing from the depth of the psyche, the we. The we psyche is an unconscious, nonverbal, pre-symbolic, symbolic procedure. And in this phase, the ego participates in individual comprehension of the others, including wishes, desires, thinking, and planning. It is limited to the reaction of pleasure and displeasure. So this is the exteroceptive, that is perception, the 5 senses. Now, Spilrain brings in interoceptive, I think, within the bodily affective experiences. And in her second stage, the now feeling toned ego particle is assimilated and dissolved in the we psyche, seeking an analog to the person or situation that initially activated the ego particle. This blending results in de-differentiation, which occurs when the ego particle combines with similar non-identical aspects of the species psyche. This novel mental state, the ego particle, now enriched with all the relevant characteristics of the collective psyche, ancestral and parental, reemerges. This new particle seeks the other through love, art, or empathy by being a responsive listener to the other. The destruction of the ego particle is a must. So the transformed ego particle, now bearing more negative feelings, avails itself to the other, and this essentially completes the death drive process. And clearly it seeks a relational home. Now, in this context, Freudian comprehension is the sensory registration of perception of the objective external world. For Spilrain, comprehension appears to be representational only, and it is devoid of affect and the intricate deep unconscious. So for her, understanding is experienced when the unconscious interacts with the conscious. And it is a complex reflective process in which affect is fundamental. Now, in the current affect regulation research, it is clear that in the first stage, our response to a situation can trigger a hyper or a hyperaroused state in the body. The limbic system, which is responsible for governing emotions, for example, fear, automatically analyzes the body's condition and initially interprets it at a subcortical level, similar to the weak psyche. Now, in the second stage, the left brain, which is our ego, consciously does the interpretation for intentional processing at the cortical level. And the modern work includes a third, a final stage that, in which interpretation is then consolidated again by the right brain. So a simultaneous process occurs in which the ego is formed through a complex interplay with the Spielrenian we psyche. Now, drawing from that drive, it is possible to assert that the destruction of ego particles and the creation of new ones occur at the same time. At any moment, the ego reflects exactly the dynamic states of the we psyche in play at the time. So now in the death drive process, some patients lack proper awareness, which is the conscious awareness, due to isolated experiences within the we psyche. It is not distorted perception due to bodily instincts. Here, the death drive is not about releasing accurate sense-based representation within ego from distorting dynamic forces. Rather, it is by placing the I summation in the increasingly essential we. For Freud, Spilrain notes that unconscious is timeless because it has to do with wish fulfillment in the present. She says in the we psyche, experience is timeless because patients have not been able to integrate their disparate experiences. And in terms of attachment, they live in a sequence of secluded presence in which one part of self-state experience is triggered and intensifies rather than coexist with the other self-states. For Freud, within the realm of sexual instinct, the expression of impulses substitutes the act of remembering. So if we take a current research to Spilrain's acting out and remembering, both are forms of memory for her. In acting out, mental and physical aspects are indistinct within the we psyche. Conversely, remembering allows for distinction between mental and physical realms, making it possible for a patient to act mentally with or without physical action. For example, the young patient reading witch stories and not physically playing at a witch. She could, but she chooses to read. Now, this brings us to the phenomena of current studies in dissociation. Spilrain gives example. More than 100 years ago, she says, this is, the example of patient who's given anesthesia, who does not feel pain, but is aware of the V-psyche level of what is happening to them. Similarly, another patient does not feel pain while they can perceive their body from the outside. Now here, hyper-aroused states such as flashbacks lead to terror and panic and are often experienced by patients with anxiety. Derealization and other hypostates cause a reduction in the level of consciousness, leading to a state of lowered awareness from one's surroundings. During dissociation, a patient may experience sudden blankness, causing their thinking to slow down significantly. Their thought processes becoming disrupted, which impairs clarity and memory recall. This mental fog can be disorienting and frustrating, and often leading to feelings of confusion and disconnection from their surroundings. When various self-states or ego within particles struggle to connect within the V-psyche, it can lead to dissociation as seen from death drive as hyper or hypo states. Still, in these negative states, a patient relates with others, even though they are consciously unaware of their relatedness. So in conclusion, Freud's commitment to infantile narcissism limited him to acknowledge Spilrain's theory. Freud did not assign primacy to nurturance. For him, sexuality was the mind's central psychic force, with seeking pleasure and wish fulfillment as critical aspects of our functioning. Within this framework, instinct drives our motivational energy that must be discharged for pleasurable feelings. Now, how does this model of energy explain affect, such as anxiety, in terms of quantity discharged from psychic energy reservoir? This is the conundrum. And what if it is not what the death drive does as a source, but what it is that warrants attention? And so the term dying more appropriately seems to highlight the intricate process that is the death drive. This suggested by Julie Reshe in my conversations with her. And here, if you see Spilrain's patient, which we discussed at the beginning of this paper, appears to be experiencing a successful dying via transformation, giving space to negative affect regulation. Here, the patient experiences deep empathy and other feels understood. Because of dissociation, other patients continue to make an effort to survive. They relate and are not narcissistically bodily focused. In a sense, patients do not lose their relational nature toward their environment in regulated or dysregulated states. And it is implicit in Spilrain's work that patients do not seek the discharge of affect as the primary motive. Now, if you think along these lines, the death drive creates a central space for subject-subject interaction rather than libidinal satisfaction. And this view, alongside our current research on negative affect, can offer profound insights into attachment and love by examining Spilrain's death drive theory. Subjective and relational nature of the mind reveals the implicit cognitive aspect of affect, as seen in her patients. Spilrain performed intensive research at the intersection of psychoanalysis, psychology, and biology. And in the evolving landscape of psychoanalytic theory, the leap from Freud's focus on sexuality to Spilrain's death drive and now affect regulation marks a pivotal shift. While Spilrain's work has gathered growing attention over the past few years, the omission of her work in affect regulation theory remains perplexing. So perhaps we all can relate to the Spilrain's we psyche via listening to her at the intersection of philosophy, neurobiology, and negative psychoanalysis. Thank you.